When the alien queen placed her hand against my chest and burned her mark into my skin, every blade in the throne hall turned toward me, every noble mouth opened in horror, and every soldier of the Silver Court dropped to one knee as if gravity itself had changed its mind. I had been dragged into the palace of thorns and chains, not as a diplomat, not as a warrior worth honoring, not even as a prisoner with a name that mattered, just one battered human pulled from the ruins of Kareth. Where my platoon had held a mining city against 6 Vaer legions for 3 impossible days, the Vaer called us primitives. But they said it with the nervous respect of predators who had discovered that prey could bite through steel. I had no rifle left, no squad, no clean uniform, only bruised ribs, cracked armor, and the memory of every human who had died buying civilians one more minute. Around me, the court glittered like a hall of knives. Nobles in living silver, generals with bone crowns, priestesses with eyes like wet amber, and above them all, Queen Avara Sol Vaer sat on a throne grown from black crystal and captured warships, silent, pale, perfect, and much to still. The High Chancellor Vorin read my crimes in a voice like glass scraping bone. Obstruction of imperial expansion, destruction of siege engines, unauthorized survival after orbital saturation, and murder of Lord Commander Sereth. Royal cousin to the Queen, the court hissed at that name, but I did not lower my eyes. Sereth had entered our bunker under a shield field and promised that any human children taken alive would be conditioned into frontier shock troops. I had been the last defender still breathing, so I pulled the thermal core from a broken drone and shoved it into his shield. He died screaming. I survived because humans are deeply inconvenient that way. Vorin demanded execution by Spinash. The generals approved. The priestesses called human defiance a contamination risk. And I listened to aliens discuss my death while thinking of Corporal Diaz firing with one arm, Dr. Meta singing to children under bombardment, Sergeant Oaks laughing when the roof collapsed because he said the enemy had improved the ventilation. Then the Queen rose, and every whisper died. She descended from the throne, each step making the court bow lower, until she stood close enough that my chains brushed her robes. "Human," she asked, "why did you not kneel when my army entered your city?" My translator shaped her words into cold thunder. I tasted blood from a broken tooth and answered, "Because my knees were busy holding up the last door between your army and the children in the shelter." The court erupted, but Avara only lifted one hand, and silence returned like an animal called to heel. She ordered the battle record displayed, a crystal wall lit with images from Kareth. Human defenders dragging civilians through smoke, sealing bulkheads with burned hands, holding corridors with mining lasers and kitchen knives. Then Sereth's private transmission played, clear and undeniable: break the adults, harvest the young. Condition the next generation. Send the prettiest to court as tribute, dispose of the rest. The silence after that was not silence. It was a wound opening. That was the first time I realized the court was not afraid of what I had done. They were afraid of what she saw in me. Avara turned to Vorin. "Did you know?" she asked. He bowed too quickly. "Majesty," the commander spoke in heat. "Did you know?" she repeated. His throat moved. I knew only that Kareth resisted pacification. The Queen looked back at me, and something cracked behind her royal stillness. Not pity, not softness, recognition. The look soldiers share when they understand the enemy in front of them was never as dangerous as the order behind them. She reached for me, and the guards panicked. "Majesty!" Vorin cried. "Do not touch the human." She ignored him. Her cold fingers pressed against the center of my chest, and pain burst through cloth and skin as white light spread in branching glyphs across my ribs. The chains around my wrists snapped open and hit the floor. I clenched my teeth, refusing to scream, because after Kareth, there were very few things left that could earn that from me. Then the entire court fell to their knees. Not some of them, not the nearest guards. All of them, generals, nobles, priestesses, executioners, servants in the shadow galleries, every proud spine bent, every crown dipped, every blade lowered. Vorin resisted for half a heartbeat, then screamed as some invisible law drove him down hard enough to crack the crystal floor. The queen had not pardoned me. She had claimed me, and in the Vercourt. That was far more dangerous, my translator choked on the whispers. Marked, impossible, old law, war bond. Crown debt, human claimant, Vorin raised his head, face twisted. You cannot bind yourself to him. He is not Ver. Avara's voice cut the hall. No, he is not. The old law does not require bloodline. It requires valor witnessed, sacrifice proven, and a life debt carried by the crown. This human killed Sereth, yes. But Sereth broke my command, dishonored conquest. And sought to harvest children, this human defended the helpless, when my own blood became a butcher. By the old law, the debt is mine. Before anyone could answer, alarms split the chamber. Palace shields compromised, internal weapons active, breach signatures above the throne. The first assassins came through the ceiling in black armor, blades humming with phase light. Their targets were clear, the queen first, me second. Because apparently becoming royal property for 30 seconds was enough to earn a place on the murder schedule. The court guards moved with ceremonial grace. And died with ceremonial speed. I grabbed a fallen spear, snapped off the decorative head, and drove the broken shaft beneath an assassin's arm where armor had to bend. He hissed. I slammed my forehead into his faceplate. Human skulls are not the hardest substance in the galaxy, but used with conviction. They make persuasive arguments. Avara turned. Black crystal rose from the floor, and the killer died above us, like an insect pinned to glass. She looked at me almost amused. Do all humans attack with their heads? Only the polite ones, I said. And for the first time, the alien queen smiled. That was when I understood the queen had not claimed a soldier. She had declared a war inside her own palace. Vorin vanished behind armed loyalists who were not loyal to her. Assassins poured through vents. And nobles who had been forced to kneel rose with blades already drawn. Avara seized my wrist. The mark flared hot between us, and dragged me through a side arch as the throne exploded behind us. The blast threw us into a corridor lined with statues of dead queens. I hit the floor hard enough to see 3 versions of the universe. Avara landed badly, silver blood spilling from a cut across her side. She tried to stand, failed, and forced herself upright with the kind of will that explained why assassins kept trying and failing. You should leave me, she said. That is a stupid order, I told her. I am your queen. Technically, you marked me if you die. I assume the paperwork becomes unbearable, she stared, then made a sharp sound that might have been a laugh. Footsteps thundered behind us, and we ran deeper into the palace. The inner palace was older and darker than the throne hall, its black crystal walls veined with living circuitry. Avara explained between breaths that Vorin meant to seize the heart chamber. The ancestral intelligence that authenticated Imperial command, if he controlled it, he could declare her unstable, revoke her reign, and send every Ver fleet against Earth before sunrise. He would call the mark contamination, call human courage infection, and cleanse our worlds in the name of purity. I thought of Earth then, loud, messy, stubborn Earth. Cheap diners, schoolyards, overcrowded trains. My mother in Nebraska still sending messages to a missing son. Every ordinary human place empires never understand until they decide to erase it. Then we move faster, I said. Avara glanced at me. You would fight for Earth after what my fleets have done. I fight for people. Earth just happens to have a lot of them. We entered a gallery of suspended war banners as assassins closed behind us. The control panel was locked. Avara was bleeding. My shoulder still ached from chains and impact, so I did what humans do best. I built a terrible plan out of nearby garbage. I tore down a banner, wrapped it around a broken display drone, and shoved it across the floor. The assassins fired at the movement, revealing themselves. Avara was too weak for another royal strike, so I threw a ceremonial helmet at the nearest killer. It hit with a ridiculous clang, not lethal, not elegant, but confusing enough for me to charge low and take his legs while she finished him with his own blade. The second assassin shot me through the left shoulder. Pain detonated white behind my eyes. Avara killed him, then pressed her palm over my wound. The mark flared. My bleeding slowed. and her face tightened as if she had taken part of the pain into herself. "Why would you do that?" I asked. "Because if you die," she said, "I must explain to the old law why I damaged its chosen witness within 1 hour." We kept moving, wounded, hunted, tied together by a bond neither of us understood, until the corridor opened into the mirror hall, where the walls reflected possible deaths instead of faces. I saw myself burned, stabbed, crowned, dissected, forgotten. At the far end stood Vorin with 12 nobles and 3 palace sentinels, huge machines of crystal and bone. "Their weapons already bright, Majesty," Vorin called. "Your reign ends with dignity if you surrender the human." Avara straightened beside me. My reign began with my sister's dagger at my throat. "Chancellor, your offer lacks novelty," Vorin pointed at me. "You shame the court, you mark an animal, you raise enemy blood above Vare blood." Avara's answer rang through the hall. "No. I let human courage shame us into remembering what strength was supposed to mean." Some nobles shifted at that, uncertain, because they had expected denial, rage, royal pride, not their own empire placed on trial. The sentinels attacked, and courage became movement, or it became a corpse. The first blast shattered the floor where we had stood. Avara pushed left, I rolled right, and the mark burned like a warning tether between us. Somehow I felt where she moved before I saw her, and somehow she felt me. 2 wounded fighters turning shared pain into timing. A sentinel swung a blade the size of a shuttle wing. I ducked too late, felt it tear my suit, and slammed my broken spear into its knee joint. Avara sent a crystal lance through the crack, and the machine collapsed. Nobles joined the fight. One came at me with a dueling sword, and the expression of someone who had only killed people forbidden to strike back. I let him cut my sleeve, stepped inside his reach, and punched him in the throat. Yet numbers matter. Bravery is not magic, and human stubbornness does not stop plasma forever. A sentinel struck Avara across the chest and threw her into a mirror hard enough to crack it. She fell. The mark flashed cold, and Vorin raised a hand. "Kill her. Keep the human alive. Let him watch what his contamination costs." Something simple and ancient woke inside me. Not rage, because rage burns hot and wild. This was colder, the decision every human soldier eventually meets. The place where survival stops being the goal, and someone else's survival becomes the mission. I ran at the sentinel. It was too big, too armored, too fast. Every reasonable species would have avoided it. Humans are not reasonable when the wrong person is about to die. I jumped onto its weapon arm as it swung, climbed with one good arm and both legs, took a plasma dagger from a dead noble, and drove it into the glowing command node at the base of its skull. The sentinel smashed me into a wall. Tried to peel me off. I held on and screamed. Not from fear, not from pain, but because sometimes the body needs a sound to carry the impossible. The node cracked. The sentinel fell, and I fell beside Avara, unable to move as Vorin approached with a blade. "Human bravery," he said, "is merely delayed extinction." Avara tried to rise, failed. I reached for the dagger, too far. Vorin lifted his weapon over her heart. Then every mirror in the hall turned black, and a voice older than architecture spoke from the walls. Claimant recognized, bond witnessed. Valor repeated. Vorin froze. Avara looked stunned. "The heart chamber is listening," she whispered. The voice continued. "Human claimant has fulfilled secondary trial. Protection of crown under betrayal. Sacrifice without command. Blood debt intensified." The mark on my chest burned so bright it lit the hall. Vorin staggered back. "No, he is not Vare. He cannot be recognized," the ancient voice answered. "Correct," Enhancement noted. I started laughing then, not wisely, not politely. Because even half dead on an alien floor? I knew an insult when I heard one. Vorin ran. And we followed because nearly dying was apparently not enough to excuse us from politics. The mirror hall opened into the heart chamber, a vast spherical space built around a black star. Not a real star, Avara said, but a compressed archive containing every oath. War, coronation, crime, and execution committed by the throne. Vorin reached the command altar and slammed his bleeding hand onto it. "I invoke emergency succession," he cried. Holographic faces appeared above him. Governors, admirals, bloodline elders, all traitors. All watching from secure channels, they had planned the massacre. The trial, my execution, the queen's removal. They needed a contaminated queen and a dead human to justify cleansing Earth. The conspiracy was not hiding in shadows anymore. It was wearing a crown made of witnesses. Avara gripped my arm. If the Corps accepts, loyal systems will be locked out. So we argue, I said. This is not a human court. Even better, ours are slow. I stepped to the altar, bloodied, limping, one arm half useless, and placed my marked hand beside Voron's. The Corps went silent. You want evidence? Here's mine, I said. And because the mark connected me to the old law, the archive opened my memory, the chamber filled with Kareth as I had lived it. Smoke so thick, we breathed through wet cloth. Children under steel benches, Diaz grinning with blood on her teeth, Meta whispering names so the dead would not become numbers. Sereth's soldiers laughing outside the hospital dome. My own hand shaking as I wired the drone core, not because I wanted glory, but because I was terrified and did it anyway. The traitors watched human fear refuse to become obedience. They watched us hold a corridor with mining tools. They watched a boy of 16 hand me ammunition because he wanted younger children to sleep. They watched Sergeant Oakes pin a note to his armor before his final charge. Tell my wife I bought the cheap ring because I spent the rest on the honeymoon. Then Avara's memory opened, and we saw her as a child queen, standing over her murdered mother, swearing before the same black star that conquest would have law. Power would have restraint, and the Dominion would not become a devouring swarm. We saw counselors teach compromise, generals teach necessity, nobles teach that mercy was decorative. We saw Voron whisper purity into the court year after year until the Empire forgot the difference between strength and appetite. Avara looked exposed and furious, but she did not pull away. The Archive Corps rendered judgment. Queen Avara Solver remained sovereign. Human claimant Elias Vale recognized under war bond. Crown Shield and Debt of Valor. Purity Council designated treasonous. Command authority revoked across the chamber. Holographic elders shouted and vanished as channels were cut. Admirals screamed for fleets that no longer answered. Voron stumbled back from the altar. Avara lifted her head. Every inch of wounded weakness gone beneath the return of the queen. By throne authority, she said, I name you Oathbreakers. The heart chamber answered with command pulses through the palace. Sealed doors opened. Loyal guard channels restored. Defense systems woke, and somewhere above us. The coup began dying room by room. Voron made one final mistake. He lunged for me. I caught his wrist, pulled him close, and said, You keep underestimating knees. Then, I drove mine into his ribs, hard enough to fold him hours later. When the palace was secured and the surviving court had been dragged back into the broken throne hall, I stood beside Avara wearing borrowed armor, medical wrappings, and the expression of a man who deeply regretted every life choice that led to ceremonial politics. The nobles knelt again, but this time not because the mark forced them. Fear bent some, calculation bent others, but in the outer ring, I saw guards lower their heads with something like respect. Avara addressed them from the shattered dais. Her gown torn, her side bandaged, her crown lost somewhere in the chaos. And she looked more royal without it. The Dominion has mistaken cruelty for strength, purity for honor, conquest for purpose. That error ends now, she turned to me. Elias Veil of Earth, defender of Kareth, witness of the throne, bearer of my mark. By old law and sovereign will, you stand under my protection, and I under yours. Let every world hear it. My translator hesitated over the next phrase, then delivered it with maximum discomfort. Consort shield, the court rippled. I leaned toward her. Consort. A political category, she said softly. Does Earth get a vote? I asked, her mouth curved. Earth will be offered an alliance. That word moved through me harder than any wound. Avara faced the court again. Send this decree to every fleet. All operations against human worlds cease immediately. Reconstruction aid will be delivered to Kareth. The dead will be named, the guilty will be tried. The Dominion will learn restraint, or it will learn fear from me. One palace guard struck his fist to his chest. Then another, then hundreds, armor against armor. A slow thunder rolling through the hall. Some nobles refused, some priestesses wept. Some generals stared at me as if I were a plague. Others as if I were a weapon they desperately wanted to understand. I did not feel like a weapon. I felt exhausted, hungry, stitched together by alien medicine and stubbornness. But when Avara looked at me, I understood the mark was not ownership. Not truly, it was a public confession. The most powerful woman in the Dominion had told her empire that a human life had become part of her law. And now, every enemy she had would have to decide whether they feared that more than they hated it. The broadcasts went out before dawn, on Earth. They would replay the footage endlessly. The prisoner in chains, the Queen's hand on his chest, the court collapsing to its knees. Analysts would argue politicians would posture. My mother would probably throw a chair at a screen before crying. And somewhere in classrooms and barracks and crowded apartments, people would see the Great Ver Dominion kneel because one battered human had refused to let children die quietly. Later, on a quiet balcony above the ruined palace, Avara and I watched loyal ships rise into the violet sky. She wore no crown, I wore no chains between us. The mark pulsed gently, warm now, almost peaceful. You understand? They will call you mine. She said, let them. You objected before. I thought it meant property, and now I look down at the wounded city. At dawn, touching towers built by conquerors, and now, maybe held by something better. Now I think it means responsibility. Avara studied me for a long moment, then placed her hand over the mark. Not burning this time, only resting there. Among my people, she said, the marked kneeled to no one but each other. Somewhere beneath that balcony, medics carried rebels away. Scribes rewrote decrees with shaking hands. And loyal guards whispered my species' name like it had become a new kind of oath. I knew peace would not arrive cleanly. Empires do not apologize without choking on the word first. And humans do not forgive just because a queen speaks beautifully under a violet sunrise. But a door had opened. Not wide. Not safely. Only enough for one wounded soldier and one wounded queen to stand in the gap and dare the galaxy to close it. Behind us, in the throne hall, the court remained on its knees, waiting for the queen and the human to return. And for the first time since Kareth, I believed the galaxy might survive us both.